Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live in Gainbridge Arena once again, site of where I last spoke to you about 7 hours ago after Purdue beat Penn State. Tonight, it's Purdue's 69-61 win over Michigan State in the Big Ten tournament semifinals. This is your wrap video. It is brought to you by our friends at the Purdue Club Hotel, home of the Boiler Up Bar. Please check them out. If there was a Purdue Club Hotel somewhere in downtown Indianapolis, that's where I'd be staying. Purdue now meets Iowa in the championship game of the Big Ten tournament tomorrow afternoon on CBS. I knew this was going to happen. All along, it would be Purdue and Iowa. Ever since I got down here, it was a matter of destiny. It was a foregone conclusion because as I went through my stockpile of office supplies preparing for the college basketball postseason here, and I went through my massive collection of unused legal pads that I use to take down notes that I can't even read at the end of games, during games, I decided to switch things up, and I went with yellow. So, yellow, gold, Iowa versus Purdue. Clearly, it was meant to be. Yeah. So Purdue beats Michigan State 69-61 again to reach the Big Ten tournament's title game. I think winning a Big Ten tournament title tomorrow would be a really big deal for Purdue. I've said that from the outset of the postseason here, that I think this postseason for Purdue is about a measure of redemption for, not at least sharing the Big Ten regular season title with a team as good as this one, but more than anything, establishing some positive momentum moving into the postseason. And I think that's exactly what Purdue right now is doing. I think, obviously, Purdue has beaten two teams that aren't Duke and Gonzaga. Michigan State's a good team that I think has overachieved this season. Never an easy team to play, but I think Purdue has faced two teams that have been beatable. But to Purdue's credit, I think Purdue has really come a long way in some of the things that they have needed to do to be as postseason ready as they possibly could be. To win some of the games that they weren't able to win during the Big Ten season that ended up costing them that share of the Big Ten title, or an outright Big Ten title, either way. I think what you look at what's transpired here the last, I don't want to say 48 hours because it was the span of like 20 hours. It wasn't even 2 days. It was 2 games in the span of a day. Defensively, they trended well down the stretch of the regular season. I think they've played well enough. I don't want to say they've played, great. I don't want to back into suggesting that all of a sudden these are the late 80s Pistons here. But I think that they've played well enough. I think they've gotten stops they need to get at opportune times. I think they've made things hard on opponents, much harder than they normally do. I think ball screen defense against certain matchups are going to be difficult. Purdue has faced those matchups because they have faced two really physical guards in ball screen defense here the last 2 games. Jalen Pickett was a real handful. A.J. Hoggard was a real handful. And Purdue survived those games. I think they did a good enough job across the board defensively against Michigan State here, which is a limited offensive team. It absolutely positively is. And how much of Michigan State's atypically bad three-point shooting had to do with Purdue, that's up to the eye of the beholder. But Michigan State had 20 points in the first half. I mean, you hold somebody who's going to the NCAA tournament to 20 points in the first half of the game, you've done a pretty good job. I think, again, down the stretch, after Eric Hunter made those threes that kind of broke this game open to a certain extent, I think Purdue did a good enough job defensively again down the stretch. I thought they did a great job closing it out defensively against Penn State yesterday. Real progress for Purdue in an area where they've not been great. I do think they've been a little bit better than what everybody perceives them as. Everybody just looks at KenPom, especially national people. They just look at KenPom, and that kind of defines you. But what KenPom does not tell you is that, hey, here are the games Purdue's lost, and here's how many times they turned the ball over. Also, here's the number of impossible shots a team has made to beat you. The KenPom stuff doesn't take into account that Michigan State in the first game made 5 really difficult shots at the end of shot clocks. That's good offense beating good defense. That stuff is not reflected in that one singular defensive efficiency number That said, Purdue has not been a great defensive team all year long. I think they have trended well lately, but I think too many people just kind of look at the number and say, oh, Purdue's this in defensive efficiency. They can't play well. They just kind of cancel you from a defensive perspective. And I don't know if that's necessarily completely reflective of reality. But to my original point, Purdue has made progress defensively down the stretch. It will be interesting to see what they do when they play a really good offensive team. Hey, here comes one tomorrow. This could be a really high-scoring game because you have two really good offensive teams going at one another. At least one of them, defense is kind of optional sometimes. Purdue has kind of come and gone defensively. This could be a real entertaining game. A really good way for the Big Ten to close out this wild event. This has been an absolutely wild tournament. Jaden Ivey is pretty good, just in case you haven't noticed yet. I think late in the regular season, I think he was a little bit, quiet. I think he was capable a lot more. I think people were really loading up on him, which they have every reason to. And I think he struggled with that a little bit. Didn't react to things on the fly as well. Made some flawed decisions at times. But he's really kind of reversed things as the postseason has rolled around here. I think he was really good against Penn State, and I think he was outstanding against Michigan State today. He was you couldn't have asked a lot more of him. I think he's doing a good job defensively too here the last 2 days. 2 games. 2 games in 1 day. How about that? He gets 22 points on 14 shots today, 5 assists with only 1 turnover. Again, I think he's doing a pretty good job defensively. He's has had a couple of those moments late in games where, I think everyone's internal inclination is to stop. Pull it back. Let's get a good clock draining possession here. And he makes an unbelievable play. And he's just an unbelievable talent. It's just an unbelievable athlete, an unbelievable talent. And he has really kind of put his best foot forward here in this Big Ten tournament. 9 rebounds. 2 fouled 6 times. I'm just looking at the box score at this point. Just really coming on at the right time. And this is his time right now. This is when your best players and your best guards have to be at their best because guard play matters so much in the NCAA tournament. There couldn't possibly be a better time for Jaden Ivey to be playing his best basketball. I'm not saying this is his best basketball. November was pretty unbelievable. But this is a great time for him to be playing some of his best basketball. Carrying it into the NCAA tournaments could be absolutely essential for this team. As his decision-making goes, as his defensive attentiveness goes, so might Purdue. He's got that sort of level of influence over this team. And all indications are, since the postseason tipped off, he's ready. So that's a scary proposition for Iowa and for the people who come after Iowa here. I think there's direct correlation, guys, between Purdue losing and Purdue turning the ball over. And I don't have to go through this again. This has been every video this year. This has been every game preview this year, including the one I wrote in like 10 minutes this morning for no reason that nobody read, because I'll be damned if I was going to do it at 4 a.m. this morning. So I said, the hell with it. And then I slept in till 9:30, and I got up and I came over here and I cobbled together the most half-assed preview I think I've ever written in my life. In the span of 10 minutes, I put it up there. Nobody read it, but at least I can say I've had a preview for every game this year. Anyway, every preview this year, point number 1 for Purdue, take care of the ball. They've gotten so casual at times this year with the ball. If they just valued every possession the same way, I'm not saying you'd never turn the ball over, because you have situations where you need offense from avenues that are going to produce turnovers. When you play through the post, you're going to turn the ball over. When you have a super athletic, super aggressive scoring guard who plays off the dribble a lot, exists in traffic a lot, exists in transition a lot, you are going to have turnovers. That's the nature of the beast. But you got to keep them to a minimum. You got to make sure those guys are valuing the basketball the way Wisconsin values the basketball, the way Big Ten basketball has historically mandated that teams value the basketball. And I thought tonight they were great. There were a couple of bad turnovers, but at the end of the day, there were only 9 of them. And that's a big deal, especially when you're hitting the offensive glass the way Purdue hit the offensive glass, and especially when you're defending in the half court the way you did. Not giving an opponent anything easy off your own turnovers when they're struggling to score in the half court anyway is half the battle. That is a big, big deal. That is sort of the game within the game sometimes, especially in Big Ten basketball. And I thought Purdue did a great job tonight winning, or today, whatever the hell the time this game tipped off. It's all run together at this point. It's been 2 games, and I'm in mid postseason form here. Purdue did a great job today winning the games within the game. I think they did a great job beating Michigan State at Michigan State's game, which I think is what you always have to do against them. You got to be tougher on the glass. You got to limit your turnovers. You can't let them get in transition, stuff like that. And I think that Purdue did a great job carrying out a game plan once again. And I think this looks like a team that's kind of building up to something here in the NCAA tournament. That doesn't mean it can't all go splat very easily. Splat. I said splat, right? Yeah. But I think Purdue has looked the part of a postseason-ready team here, whereas I don't know if they did a whole lot of the season because they struggled in close games. They struggled in possession games. They struggled away from their home floor in environments like this, in competitive environments like this. I mean, not actual environments like this, because Purdue's had a lot of fans here. But I just think Purdue's done a lot of stuff right here in Indianapolis. The physicality they've played 2 very physical games here, and they've got the better of both of them. In the NCAA tournament, Purdue's physicality is going to be one of those things that another team sees on film, but then can't really understand until they're actually running through Zach-Edey's screens, which, by the way, I've been down on the court. I can't remember if I said this last night or not, but I've been down on the court here for these 2 games, and you actually hear the sounds. You realize how physical these games are. You get exhausted just kind of watching from this close, but you hear the sounds people make when they hit Zach-Edey coming in the screens, and you hear the sounds people make when they're trying to block out Trevion Williams, and they're unnatural sounds. That's the physicality. Mason Gillis is going to hurt a teammate sometime by going after defensive rebound the way he was going after defensive rebounds today. Purdue has done really well the last 2 days with loose balls. That has not been this team's strengths all year long. I think you're seeing some real urgency on Purdue's part here. That carries into the NCAA tournament. That is going to be a really big deal too. But my original point was about physicality. I think it's the kind of thing that when a team can watch film on Purdue and say, oh, he's big, but then they get out on the court and then they see them in real life, and then they have to block them out, and then they have to run through their screens and stuff like that, then it's an entirely different deal. And I think especially early in the NCAA tournament, before you get to the teams that see that sort of thing regularly, I think that can really matter. But long story short here, I think Purdue has done all the right things here these first 2 days at the Big Ten tournament. I think they're showing real progress in areas where I think they've needed to progress, to be as postseason ready as possible. And they faced some adversity. I think there's importance in that too. And obviously Penn State made its run, Michigan State made its run. This conference is a complete debacle this year. You cannot watch a game, it feels like, without somebody going up 15 and either losing or losing their lead, unless you're playing Northwestern and you're Iowa. Every game is a complete season unto itself. It's just a complete debacle this year more than ever. It's always a debacle, but this year more than ever, it is more of a debacle. I think Penn State and Michigan State was just Big Ten basketball this year. I think that's just kind of the nature of the beast. But for Purdue to twice have had its back up against the wall and twice gather the cohesiveness and the poise and all of that stuff to make big plays at big times, to not lose their minds, I think is something you expect at this time of year from really good teams, but also something Purdue still had to prove. And they've done that through 2 games so far. Now, as they say, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in the same season. I'm not really sure why they say that, but they say that. So we'll see. The way Purdue's defending, I think they can at least get in Iowa's way tomorrow. The way Iowa's defending, I think Purdue can have some success. Not to say Iowa's not done a decent job defensively. I just always assume that they're not always the most dialed-in team from a defensive perspective. They are going to play small. Be ready for that. They are going to put the Murrays out there at the 4 and the 5. They are going to be a handful for Purdue offensively, but Purdue's got to kill them from an offensive perspective with their size and with their ability to break them down off the dribble, stuff like that. Iowa's going to score points tomorrow. It's just a matter of whether or not Purdue can take care of the basketball enough to the point, get enough offensive rebounds, all that game within the game stuff in order to bring home a Big Ten championship tomorrow. People say, the extra rest would have been great to not be playing on Sunday. I fundamentally reject that stance because I think if you have a chance to win a championship, you go and win a championship. And I think if you have a chance to build positive momentum moving into the NCAA tournament, you do just that. I am completely rambling at this point, so I am going to cut this off from Gainbridge Fieldhouse here in Indianapolis for the second time in what will be 3 days. This is Brian Neubert from goldenblack.com. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. Thank you for listening. And thank you for processing our materials, however you process our materials, and however incoherent those materials might be after the provider of said materials got probably 4.5 hours of sleep last night. Thank you to the Purdue Union Club Hotel and the Boiler Up Bar for your continued support, and we will talk to you guys again right around this time tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to do a rap video after the game or after the selection show. It would seem absurd to do one after the game, right before the selection show. So I think I'll kind of let it all play out and then be back at you. See you, everyone.